morning. I'm Khaled Hassan and I'm working with Kevin Hayakawa, and today we're going to look at air layering with ornament shells. The reason I use ornament shells is they seem to retain the moisture really well, and it's a big problem we have here in Southern California with the winds in terms of losing moisture in the air layers. So first thing, these are little Christmas ornament shells. You can get them under a variety of names. I have 5-inch ones that are really big, but they seem to take a long time to fill up. So I'd like to use the 3-inch ones, about 80 millimeters. The first thing you do is you want to get a rough idea of what caliber hole we're going to drill. So when I put this against the trunk, I can see this is a little more than 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna have to drill about 1/4 inch on one side, 1/4 on the other side. I'd rather underdo it rather than over it. If the hole is too big, this is gonna fill with soil and it's gonna drag down and fall and rip off any roots. So I wanna make it tight. So I'm gonna start off drilling a little bit on either side. I'm gonna fill this with soil and pack it around this. Before I drill, I set this like so. So I'm closing the shell, and I close it so that the two tabs are off center. That makes it easy for me to open and close to get soil in or out relatively easily. So it's like this, and then I'm gonna drill, and I drill through the middle. It takes a while. This step takes a couple of minutes. So this is about 1/4 inch right now. I need about twice this size. So I can either use a larger drill bit, or I tend to push against one side. So I'm pushing my hand to the left, and you can see I've now widened the hole that I've set amount. And I'm gonna need the hole to be just a little bit bigger than this, but this is pretty close. You can see just by wiggling this, and I don't wiggle it back and forth. I put pressure, constant pressure on one side, and I let the heat warp the plastic. So I like to have a tight hole so that this is flush against the trunk. Mainly for two reasons. One, to try and prevent airflow from getting in and drying out the soil. And the other, to keep it tight, because it's going to be full of soil that's a little bit wet, so it's going to be a little heavy. Using the small ornaments, it's not as big a deal because there's not as much soil. But if you use a 5-inch one, something like this, you'll feel the weight dragging down. And so the tighter it is, the tighter it's going to hold on to your tree or your branch. So now that I have this set like this, you're going to want to get your soil,
which is ProMix.
I'm using HP ProMix. I've used other soils in the past. I like the ProMix because I find that it's light and airy and seems to let roots grow through really well. And because I've had success with it, I decided not to really change things. We're air layering a fig. Not all plants are amenable to air layering, but it can be done. I've seen people air layer avocados successfully, and I've seen mangoes air layered. And this variety of fig is called Tia Pena. It's a Spanish fig. So it'll close like this. I just like to get a rough idea. And then I wet it, so I'm going to dip it in water. and then I squeeze the water out. All right, now that I've got this filled and packed and I've pushed out excess moisture, now we're ready to fit it. So I like my air layers to be about 6 to 8 inches tall. So I'm looking in this area here to wrap that up. And I like to scrape a little bit against the outer bark. This is still soft here. I like to expose a little bit of the underlying green tissue. And I put a little rooting hormone. In this case, I'm using Clonex.
Can you talk about what Clonex is, Khaled?
Yes, Clonex is a rooting hormone. The main ingredient is indole-3 butyric acid, so there are a few different types of rooting hormone. And this induces the tissue to try and grow roots. Clonex comes out as a liquidy syrup. Some people use a rooting hormone that's in powder form. And then one that I like to use also is called Dip and Grow. And Dip and Grow, it comes out as a concentrated liquid that you dilute yourself. And when you dilute it, it's much more liquidy. I use the Dip and Grow for rooting cuttings, but for some reason I use the Clonex for air layers. I think it's just habit for me.
Where would you get something like that? Is that a Home Depot thing, or?
I've been getting mine from either Laguna Hills, Orange County Farm Supply. You can also get it online from Amazon.
What's something like that going to cost us?
You're looking at about $10 to $20. Clonex tends to be a little bit on the more expensive side. The powders tend to be somewhere about $7 to $10, but I've never used the powder. I've either done Dip and Grow, which I really like, but it's very potent, or Clonex. I use the Dip and Grow, like I said, for cuttings. Some criticism of Dip and Grow is that it may be a little too strong, and so some cuttings may root excessively to the detriment of to their own detriment, to the point where they run out of energy. But I've had lots of success with it. This looks like we've got a really good fit here. This seals up pretty well. It's going to be really tight here. You know it's good when you can let go. It wants to burst a little bit, but that's all right. It's got a little excess soil. And now what I do to seal this is I wrap it in saran wrap.
All right, hold that for you.
So we're going to wrap this in saran wrap. And saran wrap helps to keep everything tight and sealed and closed.
What would you say the success rate is with Clonex? If you had to guess.
For air layers or
air layers, yeah.
For air layers. So I would say my highest success is actually more related to using the ornaments than with the growth hormone. So I used to use just a plastic bag and soil, and I had maybe a 50% success rate with that, and a lot of that was related to the soil getting dried out. And I'd still used Clonex then. When I switched to the Christmas ornaments, or the plastic ornaments, I found they retained water much more effectively. So we actually have an air layer that I pulled off here. So this is a Smith fig tree. It's a phenomenal fig. It's a top 10 in flavor. And you can see under the saran, you can see this thick growth of roots.
About how old is that air layer?
This is about 2 months old. Now, you can see it's covered, it's bursting with roots. The yellow roots are nice and healthy. These are older roots. They can handle a lot more water. The white roots are fresh roots. So first you'll see white roots. These ones are susceptible to overwatering if you're rooting, for example. Once you start seeing yellow roots, these are more mature roots. They can handle excess water. They're a lot tougher.
So that air layer was just cut like 10 minutes ago. At this point, would you pot it up in potting soil and put it outside, or would you leave it on a heat mat, or?
So this is ready for up potting. And if you wanted to maximize growth during the season, what you do is you'd put this in a pot that's a little bit bigger than this, leave it for a week or two, then up pot that, leave it for a week or two, and keep up potting every couple of weeks. That way you get a balance between root growth and continued tip growth. What I do, because I have a hard time remembering to up pot, is I just put it in a larger 3-gallon container or 5-gallon container. You won't see any top growth for a couple months, but so long as it looks green and perky, it's doing well. It typically fills the fills the bucket with roots first. Once you get that big root mass, you then get explosive growth afterwards. So if you really wanted to micromanage the growth, you would slowly up pot it every couple weeks during the growing season. If you just wanted to set it and forget it, and you're okay being patient, I just put in a larger container. With the more mature roots, it's going to be harder to get root rot. It still is possible, but these yellow roots are mature and can handle excess water. In terms of where to put it, because this has been air layered on an in-ground tree out in the sun, this you can leave it out in the sun if you wanted to. Because we're getting into winter, if you wanted to maximize growth, I would put it maybe in a garage or indoors, so you can continue to get root growth. Roots tend to grow best around 70 degrees.
And how far away would you say we are from fruit, since that's an air layered?
This can fruit year round, not year round. This is going to fruit for you this coming year. You can see these little buds here. So you're going to have two on this particular fig. You're going to have two growth nodes. One is going to be a branch, and one's going to be a fig. That branch should be able to put figs out on its first season. So if it gets to about 2 or 3 feet long, which will be by mid-July or so, after that you'll see buds swelling on each of that new on each node of the new growth, and then these figs should be ready. Those figs should be ready sometime in September or so.
Awesome.
Maybe, yeah, July, September. The Smith fig tastes phenomenal. Some figs won't be ready for an extra year, but that's one of the benefits of air layering, is you can get, especially on a fruiting tree, you can get fruiting figs first year, maybe second year if you're a little late.
So you put saran wrap on the air layer next to you that's in a pot right now. Is there any other steps, or is that ready to go back to its spot underneath this sugar cane?
So then we've got to cover with foil. So we want to protect it from light. And the reason why is the light will prune away some of your outer growth or roots from the outer edge. There is some thought that may actually be helpful, because it's a way of pruning and forcing a denser root mass closer to the middle, kind of like air pruning. And actually that one there, I removed the foil about 3 weeks ago on the air layer I just showed you. But 3 weeks ago there were roots all the way around, so it looks like the light's forced some of those tips to turn black. So if you look closely here, there's some tips that are a little bit black at the edges. And you can see it's since then you've got new white roots forming from the inside. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but I'd say most people would say cover this up first, get a good root mass, and then either separate and put it in soil and don't bother the roots, or you could do what I did. Yeah, you're gonna like that one. So we're done. So I would do like a second here, and call it a day, or maybe even a third, and then that's it for this one.
Cool.